This is really weird, actually. These conversations have kind of bookended a kind of frantic period. The last one we had, I just finished taking down everything from my little maisonette because it was being renovated and getting it out. So I was recording, like, I just had my mattress like on the floor in my bedroom. That's how I was recording the last conversation. And today I've put the bed back up, but I'm back in, and everything's starting to look a little bit more coherent. So that's kind of nice.
All right.
I like the poetry of it, you know?
Yeah, it rhymes, yeah. Every time you look at the newly decorated maisonette, you'll think, oh, yeah, I remember those Poltergeist podcasts.
Exactly that. Or whenever I watch the Poltergeist films, I'll think of this little maisonette, you know? Maybe when I don't live here anymore in the future. Who knows?
Yeah, it's all getting engraved in the same file in the
association. It's what it's all about.
Yeah.
It's what we're made of, isn't it? You know, it's what we're made of. My God, if you work in like social care and support, working with people with learning difficulties, you really learn that very quickly. Everything is association, and it's so powerful. It's so powerful. I mean, the way you can, I mean, it sounds really cynical in a way, but the way you can use it to induce mood or change behavior, you learn that really quickly, like really quickly.
Yeah, I know a little bit about this because I have my cousin's eldest son is quite heavily autistic, quite severely autistic, and he's it's scarily, he's now, on the brink of adulthood. And he's doing really brilliantly because they live in Holland, where things are very different.
Things are rather different than they are here.
So he's had great care his entire life, because my cousin and his wife are brilliant, but they've also had enormous social assistance, So,
yes.
But a hell of a lot of that is to do with exactly what you were just talking about. Yeah,
it's an interesting thing because I really want to write some papers on it or influence sort of social care in this country a little bit more with that idea, because I've done a lot of the training, I've done a lot of the courses and whatnot, but it very rarely comes up. The notion of how association functions, sort of like the deeper psychology of it. And it's not just for, it's not exclusive to people with learning difficulties or whatever. It's all of us. Which we know. Yeah. We know on some level because we experience it all the damn time. We smell a smell and suddenly we get this flood of emotional and sensory callback,
the Proustian Madeleine thing. Yeah,
absolutely. Exactly that. And it's the bedrock of like much of our poetry and our art and our cinema and so on. It's that's another area, of course. As a writer, you learn to manipulate it. You learn how to utilize it to evoke sort of visceral feedback in the reader, because that can be really powerful. That can be
it's at the root of language, isn't it? I mean, it's one of the things I found particularly interesting when I was at university, and we did Wittgenstein, Wittgenstein's later work, where he's intensely concerned with language, and the whole concept of the language game, and the whole concept of language and as a way of putting into kind of a symbolic order our associations that are fundamentally based on what we perceive as family relationships between things. And the minute you very aesthetically, just family relationships, chains of associations that are visual and auditory and spatial and stuff like that. And I just think if people could grasp that more instead of this leaden literalism with which people approach so many things, a hell of a lot of things would become an awful lot clearer,
Absolutely. Well, I mean, something you really start to notice, certainly in the UK, is that our level of communication, largely because of the lack of consideration of those very concepts and ideas, our lack of consideration regarding communication itself. We reach a particular level when we're like, say, 5 years old, and then we stop. We stop being educated in it. We stop utilizing it as an experiment and as an art form. It's functional, and that's it. It's enough to get us through the day, through the working day, and that's largely it. You see it all the time. You see it all the time.
Oh yeah, I know. It's being taken out of normal maybe that's the wrong word, but regular education for children, even without getting into the question of children with special needs, isn't it? I mean,
Right.
I remember when I was a kid, and you probably remember this too. What's it before secondary school? Primary school, I suppose, or
Primary
junior
school,
school.
yeah.
Junior school. You would like at the end of the day, you would sit and the teacher would read a story, and you'd go through an entire book over the course of a couple of weeks or something.
Do they not do that anymore?
I don't think so. In a lot of places, they didn't do that.
That's phenomenally
and it was
sad.
I know, and it was like there wasn't a test. You weren't being assessed. It was just that the class would get together and they would go through a story just for the pleasure of, and the instruction and the mind expanding capacity of just experiencing a story together. And so, you should hear Michael Rosen on this. They've taken that out of schools, and everything is like children are given a bit of a story, and they're not given the original texts. They're given like somebody, some uncredited person somewhere has written like a digest or a description of a story. And the point of the exercise is not for them to actually understand the story, but because they get like multiple choice questions.
Oh, for fuck's sake, really?
So they get somebody's paraphrase of the myth of Perseus and the Gorgons, and it's horribly written, and it's without context, either the context of the rest of the myth or historical context or anything like that. And the point of the exercise is to get children to like answer rote empirical questions about it. What was Perseus wearing on his feet and stuff like that. It's all dead and Gradgrindian empiricism.
Yeah, and ironically, it's alienating them from the love of that stuff. They're going to associate it with these ridiculous questions and not wanting to engage at all. Now, I remember like when, not to get too old man about it, but part of that experience was it did foster my love of stories. I mean, I remember my primary school teacher, Mrs. Kemp, who was brilliant, reading us The Iron Man, by Ted Hughes, which I still bloody love to this day. Most of Roald Dahl's milieu, we encountered like the Twits for the first time there, which was wonderful, and George's Marvelous Medicine and James and the Giant Peach and SEO Trot and so many others. And it was just that's what happened. It was reading time, it was story time at the end of the day, and on the back of that we had the book fair that came round, when they would come around with those big metal cases with books and you could buy them. And on the back of that I got all of Roald Dahl's books, and I got the Iron Man and all of these books, and without that I don't know what I'd just be another working class kid, maybe not alive now. That's entirely likely, by the way.
There's a crisis in British schools. The schools don't have books, and libraries are shutting down. School libraries are shutting down, and the kids have to use local libraries, except that all the local libraries are
also closing down.
You go through your average British town now, and there's the beautiful brand new development that's going to be a shopping centre and so on and so forth.
Which, by the way, has got a half-life of about 10 years maximum. Then they just become desolate, and all you get are like the empty stalls because no one can afford the rents there, and the vape shops, the card shops, and the phone shops, and even they go away after a while.
And coffee shops that last a couple of years at most, then go out of business, and
it's funny.
Everything's out of town. And if you're lucky, on the outskirts of the same town, there's a porter cabin. That's the library. A dishevelled, dilapidated porter fucking cabin. Yeah,
exactly that. I mean, I kind of experienced it recently. I went on Saturday. I went to visit my grandmother, who's in a nursing home at the moment in Derby, and Derby's my old sort of like uni stomping ground, And I took the opportunity to just go around the city and see the places that I used to go as a student, And this is a span of about 10 years. It's not that long, really, historically. And it's dead. It's destroyed. I mean, the town has been utterly desolated, not by a disaster, not by but by capitalism, by rampant neoliberalism. The Eagle Indoor Market Centre, which was beautiful and vibrant and fun, and all of these wonderful stalls where people have been going for literally generations, and where stalls have stood for multiple generations, where a lot of the older population had their social time, and they came to buy things. All of it's gone. All of it is just gone, and it's being turned into apartments, and it's just hideous. I mean, it's hideous. The other thing that really surprised me is the town part of its economy was catering to the student population, because the student population in Derby is huge, or it was anyway. I don't know whether it still is, but all that's gone too. All of that is gone. All of the little bars and clubs and cafes and whatnot that used to cater to the student population are gone. And I find myself wondering, well, what do students do now?
Yeah.
Where do they go?
Do they go anywhere?
Right, do they go anywhere? I mean, that's the thing, right? I even went down to Curzon Street. Curzon Street is the gay street, if you like, in Derby. It's kind of like the gay quarter, where there's the club, and there's a bar, and there's all sort. There was anyway. They're all gone. So again, I'm wondering, like, where, because they almost have like a sacred quality to me, because like I was such a socially awkward and anxious young man when I went to university. I had lots of problems with social anxiety, but that helped me. Being exposed to that culture helped me. It helped me. These are my people, right? Being around, there is something innate. You want to be around other gay people. You do, other queer people. You find like the ache for the tribe almost, and you learn that when you go to these places, not when you hang around on forums on the internet. You don't get it there, but when you go to these places and you find and you mingle, where you actually are exposed to other people, and it's not there anymore, and that makes me very sad. That makes me think that there's going to be like whole generations of young queer people who don't have tribal connection outside of maybe the internet.
Yeah, I have a very similar experience, actually. Obviously, I'm not a gay person, but my best friend when I was at college was gay, and I used to go with her to the similar sort of thing, like the area of Salisbury. That was like that, and there was a particular pub that she used to go to, which was for it was a gay pub, and I was always much more at home there. I just always found the atmosphere much more friendly and easygoing, and and that's all gone now.
It's all gone. It's terrifying. That's actually quite terrifying, because the legacy of gay bars and gay clubs historically is that they're not just communal centres. They are centres of protection. They're places where people go for protection from the wider systemic predations that are aimed against us, and that's gone too. The organisational factor of them is going away, and that's problematic. That's enormously problematic, especially with the forces that are arrayed against us again now. It's actually really quite scary. It's really quite scary. I've toyed with the idea of like trying to get the people I know with money together and opening a gay establishment in my little hometown, because I'm telling you, the queer population here is huge. It's huge, but there's no outlet. There's no outlet at all.
And
there's no bar. There's no pub or anything like that.
you tried to do that, you get people picketing you with a straight pride flag saying, "Why aren't we allowed in? You're discriminating against us."
You probably would. I mean, on the other hand, given like the if you turn on Grindr anywhere around here, and it's just there's so many people. There are so many, but you know what? The interesting thing is the vast majority of them are not gay identifying. The vast, vast, vast majority. In fact, one of the significant demographics on that app around here is straight identifying married men. Fascinating.
Yeah. With any luck. Let's get onto the the main subject.
It's the way it always happens, isn't it? Have a little political discussion beforehand, and then we can segue smoothly into the other
You've
subject
got the
matter.
easier way in, haven't you?
Yeah. Yeah. So, oh man, I mean, obviously we discussed Poltergeist 1 and 2 previously, and that was great fun. That was such an uplifting conversation that one was. Just experiencing those films again was wonderful. And I found the same thing with 3, I'll be honest. I know it's the more lamented film, isn't it, of the original 3 films. And I can sort of see why it is. It is a bit of a hot mess. There's a lot of problems with it, but I really, really enjoyed it this time. For all of its problems, for all of its faults, it is really trying. It's trying to be something. It has an idea of its own identity, and it is carrying on the themes from the original film. In fact, it's kind of crystallizing them. You know how in the original film you have Cuesta Verde, which is the corporate town. Here you've got the John Hancock Tower, which is almost like it's like the crystallization of that very concept, right, of neoliberalism itself. Here you've got a self-contained environment where people live and work and shop, and that's that you almost don't have to go outside.
Yeah, it is interesting, isn't it? It's a much better film than its reputation.
Yeah,
I didn't realize really until I went back to it for this that this was I've forgotten the guy's name again, but this was directed by the guy that made Buried Alive and Deathline, also known as Raw Meat. And they are classics. They are classics of sort of grimy, cheap, dirty, unsettling horror.
Well, this has got that patina, doesn't it? It really does. I mean, he's trying to play it a bit quieter here. He's trying to like rein it in a little bit, but there are definitely elements of that. I mean, there are moments in this film that are actually quite shocking, I found.
Yeah, well, this is it. Both those films, Buried Alive and Deathline, they're both more intelligent films than they give the appearance of.
Yes.
And they're both films that have that lovely sort of nastiness about them, that you really want in horror. And I think of all the Poltergeist films, number 3 is actually kind of the nastiest, the grimiest.
There are some images in this that are really, really unpleasant. Actually, it took me a bit by surprise this time. I had seen it before, but not for a massively long time. I think the last time I may have seen it, I may have even been a teenager the last time I saw it, and I'd forgotten a lot of it. So this time, images like, for example, when Tangina gets desiccated.
Yeah.
I was like, what the fuck? I actually had a real moment when that happened, and then that followed up by that horrible sort of pupa chrysalis image of Tangina's body splitting open and the girl coming from within covered in stuff,
Yeah. There is some really good imagery. I mean, I'm kind of wired up to like this film because I don't know about you probably have the same thing, but I have kind of built in or locked in aesthetic obsessions. I have things that I'm just obsessed with. And one of them, I'll give you an example of one of them that isn't in this film. One of them is cardboard boxes. I have this thing. I don't know where it comes from, but right back to childhood, I have this fascination with cardboard boxes. And obviously, there's a lot of cardboard boxes in the world, and I'm not constantly sort of cardboard box. But in the right headspace, when you start thinking about cardboard boxes, they do interest me aesthetically. That's something to do with the way they fold and the curious mixture of sort of rigidity and fragility. I don't know, but that's an example of one of these things that isn't in this. But this has 2 of my perennial, lifelong aesthetic obsessions. It has mirrors, and it has a very tall building. And I've always been, my entire life, I've been fascinated by mirrors, and I've been fascinated by extremely tall buildings. I don't know why.
That's very interesting. It has a couple of mine as well. It has lifts. Which I've always
lift is another one of mine.
A thing. I don't know why. I don't know what it is.
Lift is another one of mine. So
I like lifts. I've got a thing about lifts. I like when you've got like a glass fronted or open fronted lift and you can see stuff. I will ride that all day. I'll be in that all day. Like the lifts that go up and down the outside of buildings, so you can see out. Yeah. Oh yes, that's me done. I don't need anything else. So, and you've got a lot of that going on here, and like yourself, mirrors definitely have a thing for mirrors. and yes, an odd sort of like it's a fascination with tall buildings, but I also find them like frightening. Like not because of the heights. The heights is I've never been frightened of heights. I like heights. You know, I one of my hobbies is to go climbing up mountains. I love getting up high on things. You know, it's something about the the monolithic quality of them. I don't know what it
Yeah.
is. I can't really define it. It's there's something looming about them, and I think it's the scale. I think it's the scale because you know when you've got a really tall building, you can't really perceive it properly, can you? It looks like it bends in almost, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, for me, it's not being up high that I find disorientating. For me, it's being at the bottom and looking up. Like
Yeah.
I have very clear memories of being in London as a child and wanting to go to Centrepoint, for instance,
Mhm.
because I wanted to stand right up against it and look upwards at it, and experiencing that as kind of a a terrifying but also thrilling thing. It was just,
Yeah.
and I remember feeling something similar when I was inside St Paul's Cathedral, and you look up to
Yes.
the inside of the dome. There's something. It's captured actually brilliantly in From Hell. There's a scene in From Hell in one of the bits where Sir William Gull is sort of drifting between time zones, and he's in the London of 1888, obviously, and one moment, and then the next minute, I think it is actually Centrepoint, the
I think
building,
it is, isn't it? Yeah.
in the comic. Yeah, I think it is, because he's suddenly confronted by this massive building, and of course, it's unlike anything he's ever seen before, and he keeps on getting these visions of anachronistic things in the future, and that's one of them.
Yeah.
And it hits him like this image of the oncoming future, and
Yeah.
I think that's part of what it is about huge buildings, because they're monolithic in it, both in the sense of being huge physical things that you can never quite rid yourself of the feeling that things like that shouldn't exist.
Yeah, I
They
think
just
that's it.
they
A
can't
part
be
of it,
real.
it's almost like you can't comprehend how they are created, you know, the process of their creation and their conception. And there's also, I mean, there's a sort of cultural and mythological thing as well. They recall ancient temples, of course, and
Mm.
tombs and things like that. You know, it's something Lovecraft plays with quite a lot, you know, when he talks about the architecture created by the great old ones and whatnot. He gets that too. He understands that, and that element is definitely in this film, like in the cinematography, the way the camera looks at that building.
Oh yeah, yeah. And it's kind of a flex that was popular around about this time. The idea not only of the very tall building as an object of fascination, but the very tall building as kind of a self-contained world.
Yeah.
Obviously, in most of the films that did it, it was a world of peril in some sense. But you get it in Die Hard, you get it in Gremlins 2.
Oh, obviously,
Um,
Gremlins 2. I mean, Gremlins 2 is probably one of the best examples, right? Because it's
yeah,
so over the top. I mean, it's so ridiculous. That building is an ecosystem, isn't it? It's
it
a
is. It's a
self-contained
universe.
ecosystem. Yeah, right.
Yeah,
It's almost
yeah,
like a science fiction film where you've got like a gigantic city-scale spaceship that's out in
yeah.
in outer space that has like a hydroponics deck and an onboard forest to regulate the oxygen and whatnot. It's that kind of thing, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, it is like a generational spaceship, or it's like a tiny country that's kind of separated from the rest of the world. It's simultaneously like the base in The Thing, which is a microcosm of American society and also completely separate from American
Of
society. And
course.
the danger is that the infection will get out of that little enclosed bubble into the rest of it. And at the same time, it's like uh, it's like an entire country all to itself. So like
Mhm.
you're watching everything that would happen to the rest of the world if the infection got out there, but on a kind of microcosmic scale.
Yeah, or in
And
this
that's
instance, you're kind of it's if the infection gets in, right? And you can't get out. If it's a self-contained environment, and Kane is kind of the infection here. Or in a certain sense, I suppose Carol Ann is kind of the infection in a way.
Carol Ann's kind of the carrier, isn't she? This
Yeah,
is the
she's the
thing.
carrier of the disease, right?
It's in many ways it's a shame to take the story out of the context of the Freeling family.
Yeah.
You lose those characters that you're very fond
Definitely,
of, obviously,
but
and they're
it tries, doesn't it? I mean, okay, you don't get anything here that's as affectionate or as warm or as engaging as what you get between the Freeling family. But it really is trying to establish a new dynamic here. It's trying its best, and the characters that are introduced are generally kind of interesting. I mean, I like Tom Skerritt's character a lot, actually. I think he's really cool. I think he's a really nice guy. Another quite a positive representation of paternal masculinity going on here.
Yeah, absolutely. I think like the theme about the Nancy Allen character, who I think is meant to be her aunt, isn't she? She's
Yeah, that's
Carol Ann's
right.
aunt,
Yeah, that's
I
it.
think.
She,
And the sort of the
she's-
sub theme about her learning to love
yes,
Carol Ann. That's a bit. It doesn't
it's
really work.
it's a bit
Nobody
blunt
commits to
force
it.
trauma. It's a bit blunt
Yeah,
force trauma. I don't buy it when she starts saying, "Oh, when she starts going off on Carol Ann, when she starts saying, "Oh, I don't want her," I don't believe it. It feels forced. It feels too much somehow.
yeah,
It could have been established a little earlier if they were going to do that, if they were going to go that way with it. And she's supposed to have an arc, isn't she? Because she ultimately, ends up being kind of like the sort of heroine of the piece. She's the last woman standing. She has to face off against Kane, who's not Kane. It doesn't really work. That element of the film doesn't really fly. But I appreciate the attempt to. I mean, first of all, they're in the shadow of the whole Freeling family thing, and that's very difficult because there is such chemistry between those actors, and in both of the previous films, the writing is generally so good, and the acting direction is fantastic in both films. That's something we didn't really touch upon in the last discussion, but the acting direction is unbelievable in those films. It works so well. So they're up against it in this one, trying to introduce a new dynamic. And I mean, there's the other stuff as well, like the story arcs that kind of don't go anywhere or that just aren't resolved at the end, like the eldest daughter's boyfriend, he's just gone. Right, he's just gone. He's not coming back. It seems.
I think she's gone as well, isn't she?
If I remember right, does she not come back at the end? Like when you have Tangina's self-sacrifice, and does she not turn up right at the very end? But the boy doesn't. The boy's just left. Like
he just disappears.
Yeah, he's gone into the light. He's been carried off somewhere. But I think she does turn up at the end. It's so that you have got these story arcs that are slightly underbaked or are a little bit uneven or don't really go anywhere. And towards the end of the film, I kind of get that because they were up against it, weren't they? They had some real issues towards the end of this film. Not least of which, of course, because the death of Heather O'Rourke. She is replaced by a body double at the end, and a lot of the stuff that involved Heather O'Rourke was cut out of it, which you can see. You can definitely see it's a bit sort of. There is a lot more of that Deus Ex Machina from the end of the second film in this one.
Yeah, it does. It's one of those films that reeks of what they call a troubled production and
Definitely.
hasty rewrites and patching up and stuff like that, I'm afraid. And that's kind of nobody's fault. It's just one of those things. I mean, Heather O'Rourke had been quite seriously ill just before they made it as well.
Yes.
And I can't remember exactly what it was, but it kind of affected her facial appearance as well, which you can see in some of the shots.
It was Crohn's disease, and she'd had some medication for it, which of course bloated her face, which you can see in this film. I mean, it's really sad. It is actually, there is another layer of melancholy to this film watching it now and knowing what became of Heather O'Rourke, because she's older in this film, right? I mean, there's a span of years between these films. So the original film is 1982, the second film is 1986, so that's well on, right? And then this is 1988, so you've got another 2 years there. That's quite a span, isn't it? That's quite a span. And you can see it in Heather O'Rourke. I mean, she's much bigger in this film. She's much taller, and she's much more composed. She's not so much Carol Ann the little girl anymore.
Yeah, I mean, she's I think she's 5 in the first film, isn't she? And by the time she's doing the third one, she's 10 or something. And there's a huge difference there, obviously.
Massive difference. But, yeah. I mean, the badinage she has with the elder sister, I really like. I think that's really, really cool, you know. There's a little bit of forced tension there as well. I mean, I don't like it again when the sister is talking on the phone to her friends and she says something like, she badmouths Carol Ann in some way, and Carol Ann overhears. She does sort of bring it back. She says, "I didn't mean to say that," you know. But it's like, why is it in there? If you're just gonna sort of like throw it away anyway, why put it in there?
It's a bit soap, isn't it? It's one of those things that kind of happens in soap operas, so that you can just spin your wheels for an episode and it doesn't go anywhere.
You could just have an argument for a few scenes, can't you? But it doesn't even like resolve in that way. I mean, like the sister just says to Carol Ann, "I didn't mean that. People say things they don't mean," and that's it. That it's completely gone, and there is no like resurgence of that tension at all. After that, her and Carol Ann are completely simpatico. You know, it's like they're thick as thieves. You know, after that, so it's like, all right, why not just have gone with that in the first place?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, much more, you know, if you're trying to do the theme of like tension within the family, give that scene where Carol Ann overhears one of the family being mean about her, make it the aunt, and then have some sort of, you know, scene between Carol Ann and the daughter, where they talk about what the aunt said and tie it into the aunt's relationship with her stepdaughter. And, you know, there's so many more interesting ways you can do this, but you get the feeling that somebody whose job it was to make the script work wasn't really engaged on that level, you know.
It could have maybe done with a few more passes, a few more edits before going to film, and that would have seeded like the later tensions with the aunt a little bit earlier as well, so it would have made more sense when she does start to like, because I remember that moment when she does, you know, it's after all the supernatural stuff has started to happen, and she says to Tom Skerritt that it's her, she's there's something wrong with her, I don't want her here, and it comes out of nowhere. Like, before that, she is maternal towards Carol, completely maternal towards Carol Ann. She's really caring. And it's like, the only reason that tension exists is to make it an arc for the end, right? It just doesn't. It doesn't really work. It feels like, and I don't. Again, I really, really don't want people to think that we dislike this film, because I sincerely don't. I think there's really, really good stuff in this film. I genuinely like this film. But it does have some serious weaknesses. It does, and there's a few scenes that are a little bit silly as well. I mean, like the Christine scene with the possessed cars, I could have done without that. I really could have done without that. Yeah, and I think, you know, from what I understand, like the production could have done without that as well, because you had two like tech people really badly injured, and they caused $250,000 worth of damage to the building. So
it gives the impression of being one of those things that somebody thought up with as like, you know, a cheap time filling thing we can do. If we do a scene in the car park with like cars coming to life, there's no big special effects there. We just have sort of cars driving around, and we have a stuntman jumping out the way. It's great. We'll take a few days to film that, and it's a nice cheap sequence that will pad out some. And of course, as always with these things, it turns out to be the most expensive and difficult thing they do.
Obviously, of course it does. And it's also a bit incongruous as well, because this is not an action film. Even like most of the spectral sequences are not action oriented as such, and this sequence plays out like a Die Hard sequence. You've literally got Tom Skerritt like leaping over cars and cars exploding, and there's even a really silly sequence where you see like Kane at the wheel of the car, and it's like, oh, stop it, stop.
But
it.
You know, we are complaining about it a bit, despite the fact that we both like it. But we're also going to be talking about the 2015 remake of Poltergeist, and you know, if you want to talk about rushed and forced, illogical character arcs and scenes that don't go anywhere and stuff like that, let's remember that the 2015 remake in this series is the king of that. It's good. The third one's got nothing on the remake.
Well, this is something we've spoken about before, like quite a lot, and I've spoken about it with Kit and with lots of other people as well. And it's that notion of sincerity, even for all of its flaws, all of its problems. The third film is really trying. It has a vision. It has ideas. It has themes that some of which carry on from the previous film, some of which are entirely its own. It has consistent sort of like imagery and a kind of cinematic cinematic language that it's using, and some of the sequences are standout brilliant. That one where it's the strangely angled shot of the corridor outside of their
Yes,
apartment,
yes,
and you've
yeah,
got the multiple canes coming out the doors in the reflections and then closing
yeah.
the door. Oh, that stuff.
That's genuinely like, I genuinely get spooked by that, and some of the
Yeah,
other sequences, like the scene where you get scary face Carol Ann.
yeah,
It's very well done, and it does make me jump. Like when
yeah,
that face appears, I'm like, whoa, I don't like that,
yeah.
and it,
It's
it does
good.
have some genuine scares. It probably more scares per, genuine sort of, down the back of the spine stuff than the first two, to be honest. For
Yeah,
me,
because the first two are more like they're more atmospheric, aren't they? And they're more like
yeah.
they're more visual as well. So it's about the sequence and the image rather than the it's not that. This has got a lot of that going on. There's a lot of shocks. There's a lot of sort of pretty well done jump scares as well in this. That like the timing of them is really it really does make you go.
Hmm.
The one I mean,
Mm.
we mentioned the one with Tangina and her desiccation. It's not slow. It happens like in a flash. It's like a lightning flash. Suddenly, Tangina's standing there one moment, and then the next instant, she is a desiccated corpse collapsing to the floor.
Yeah, because you have this director again. I've no disrespect, but I can't remember the guy's name. But he's done um, these proper full-on horror movies in the
Mhm.
past. These movies that are actually interested in, creeping you out and grossing you out. And I mean, it's a bit of a strange thing to say because, of course, Toby Hooper made the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Right. Yeah.
But the vexed question of who actually directed the first one, or mostly directed the first one, it's got Spielberg's fingerprints all over it. It's not really trying to be a horror film as horror film.
No.
But this one definitely is, because the director has that sensibility.
This has got a really interesting patina to it. It feels like it's so redolent of the 1988, right? It is in the height of like VHS horror, and this is what it feels like. It feels slightly low rent a lot of the time, and that is not, by the way, that is not a criticism. That is absolutely
No. On
not
the
a
contrary,
criticism. No, absolutely.
yeah,
This feels like the kind of horror film where you would have that wonderful experience where you go to a mom and pop like video rental store and you would get it off the shelf, or you would watch it in an afternoon or an evening or something.
yeah,
That's what this is. That's what it's trying to be, right? It is definitely not trying to like equal or recreate the previous two films. It is trying to be its own thing. Okay, it doesn't always succeed in that, but it is really earnestly trying, and I will give it such leeway for that and such praise for that.
yeah. No, it's exactly like that. You go to the rental place or the garage where they rent videos, and you pick one out based on it having a good cover. And
Yeah.
this has a really good poster. Actually, this is like
Yeah.
this wonderful high contrast picture of the tower block or the building. Tower doing what we were talking about before. The point of view is from the bottom up, so you're looking up as it as it tapers up into the sky, and there's lightning around it, and you have Carol Ann in the foreground doing that on the ground, looking up at it, and you only see the back of her head. It's a really good arresting poster, and
it's ominous,
and
it's
cover.
strange,
Yeah,
and then it kind of establishes mystery. You don't really know like what the significance of this tower is.
Yeah, and then you get it home, and you get one of those, very quite low rent, but very sincere and grimy and gritty and nasty films that's
and
interesting,
fun, right? I mean,
yeah, and they're fun,
really
exactly.
fun.
Yeah.
This whole film is really engaging. I mean, even when it's not working, it's actually really fun. I mean, one of the things that doesn't really work for me is Carol Ann's counselor, the psychiatrist guy. He's painted. I mean, there's this weird sort of thematic dynamic set up between him and Tangina. He is like he's an archetype that you've got in a lot of horror films around this era, which is he's the skeptic, right? He's the sort of like evil skeptic who won't accept anything and questions everything and is locked into these very particular ways of thinking. But he just comes off as like petulant and unpleasant, and some of his motivations are really weird. Like his motivation for going down to the tower, where it's really strange. It's really, really bizarre. Why would you do that? I mean, he's the counselor from her school, isn't he? She goes to like some specialist school for troubled youth, apparently. Why would you
You
do
get the feeling
that?
he's kind of invested in it from kind of this spiteful, smug,
Yeah,
elitist. I'm going to disprove this. You feel like he's got some kind of personal vendetta against Carol Ann because she dares to say things that he, in
right.
his Olympian superciliousness, how dare you say these things? I'm going to prove that you're wrong.
Yeah, it's actually really odd. He's almost like, I don't know whether it's because of the actor's performance, which is really snide and
Mm.
slightly Disney villain. It has this slightly like
Yeah,
mustachio
yeah,
twirling quality to it.
yeah, yeah,
The way he talks about her to, when she's in the classroom and they're looking through the mirror at her, to the people who are sort of assessing him, there's contempt. There's
yeah.
odd contempt in his language and in his tone for her. He seems to regard her as a kind of. I mean, what I love about it is his theories as to what is actually going on with regards to the previous events, the whole thing with the Freeling family and the stuff that's going on now, is as batshit as it's just ghosts or it's supernatural. It's as batshit. I mean, he comes up with this freaky, bizarre sort of like 40 times notion that she is somehow able to induce hallucinations and manipulate people's minds and make them see things. I mean, even when like he literally sees a ghostly hand throw a coffee mug through a mirror, doesn't he? At one point,
Yeah, yeah.
and he just rationalizes it. And I mean, I don't really buy it. I'll be honest, I don't entirely buy it.
No, but I think there's a kind of contempt, isn't there, as you said, and I think he kind of holds Carol Ann in contempt, and he thinks she's lying for attention,
Hmm.
and he can't let go of that assumption, So everything
Yeah.
he sees has to be fitted into that because he's got to be in control, looking down
Yeah.
on this little girl who's he's the counselor at this school for troubled children, so it's his entire worldview.
Hmm.
These children are troubled,
Yeah.
ergo you can't. He doesn't have respect for them. That's
No.
fundamentally his character. It's like because he is who he is, and his job is to deal with these troubled children. He doesn't look upon them, and hence Carol Ann, as people. He looks upon them as kind of annoying problems, and that
Yeah.
does kind of tie into how Carol Ann is seen, or at least notionally seen, by the aunt, doesn't
Yeah,
it?
I suppose it does. I mean, and that it kind of feeds into that because he does mention that to them at some point, doesn't he? He does
Mm.
say that it's some sort of contrivance, that it's her that's doing it, And I mean, I suppose because he is her counselor, he is an authority figure, they defer to him.
Mm.
So there is that element, and he does introduce that, which makes him, pertinent to the story, I suppose. It's just the way he gets there. It doesn't, because
It
he seems
doesn't
to hate her
really.
from the very beginning. He just has
Yeah.
utter contempt for her from the very, very beginning, and that doesn't really work for me. There's also, I mean, there's
You
him.
don't really need him plot wise
No,
either.
no, you don't. I mean, like most of the stuff. I mean, I think it was a mistake to go outside of the tower at any
Yeah.
point. To be honest, that kind of breaks that notion of the sealed, homogeneous environment. I
Yeah.
didn't really want to see Carol Ann in particular outside of the tower. I don't know why that doesn't work for me.
Yeah, no, as you say, it breaks that idea of the tower as kind of a self-contained universe.
Yeah, I mean, there is another
Yeah.
thing with him as well. Tangina accuses him because there's this really weird, slightly unexplored notion that somehow Carol Ann's memory has been slightly erased somehow or suppressed. She doesn't really remember as much about the events in Questa Verde as like we do as the audience. And
Yeah.
Tangina accuses the counselor of reminding her of these, and it acts as a kind of beacon. It summons Kane back from wherever he ended up at the end of Poltergeist 2. I thought he was done, myself. I thought he was gone, but whatever.
Yeah, no, and it ties in with the fact that the actress is visibly a bit older, and
Yes.
I think that's quite a good idea, kind of playing around with the idea that Carol Ann's memories are incomplete.
Yeah.
And the idea that as they come back, that sends a signal. That's not a bad idea at all.
It's actually rather interesting. I mean, they could have played with that a little bit more, to be perfectly honest. I mean, it almost feels like this was a deliberate move on behalf of maybe the Freeling family and maybe Taylor and Tangina to protect her, right? That's why they sent her away.
Well, wouldn't that be an interesting idea? Like they try to make her forget about it,
Yeah.
because they need to, maybe for her psychological health, or maybe because there is a sense in which, I mean, it's established in the second film that she is psychic,
Yep.
And that she's inherited that from her grandmother.
Yep.
So there is a sense, which it's kind of implied in the first one, but it's brought out quite specifically in the second one, that there is something about Carol Ann that attracts these things.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
And that's one of the themes of the third movie, actually, because you have, like, as you say, the counselor at the school, he kind of blames her, and the aunt kind of blames Carol Ann, and they're not wrong exactly, are they?
No,
this is the thing.
No, they're not entirely wrong.
She is, as we were saying, she's the foreign element, or the corruption inside the system that is the tower block. She's what brings this thing into it. And I mean, that leads me to something else I love about the movie, which is the way it treats the architecture of the tower block.
Oh yeah,
because
amazing,
it treats it as, like, I mean, the bit with the mirrors that you were talking about, that's a brilliant example, and the way things appear in mirrors that aren't out there in the quote unquote real world as well. The fabric of the building itself has been corrupted, like a hard drive, and it's being used as like a hard drive. The information, as it were, of the poltergeist intrusion is kind of storing itself on the building as like a drive. Or like a storage mechanism, and it's working its way through it and using it as its own way. It's using the walls and the mirrors and everything as a way of getting around. So it's like a corruption of information, and that's really interesting, because architecture is a kind of language, as we know.
Absolutely, yeah.
And this is very specifically modernist architecture as well. It's that kind of, it started in the early 20th century with Le Corbusier and people like that. And then you have people like Mies van der Rohe specifically goes over and starts designing the look that becomes the quintessential look of corporate America, the skyscraper in America. And it all derives from that same modernist international style thing, that's all based on kind of this idea of rationalism and purity and cleanness. The building is a machine for the machine of the human to live in rationally and cleanly, and they're supposed to be in harmony with each other. So the idea of this particular type of building, this modernist corporate structure, which is apparently very rational, but it's also, because it is architecture, it is a language, that the language itself is being corrupted. The information that it stores is being corrupted. That's really interesting. And if you want to look at it that way, then the vector is Carol Ann. She's the virus.
Absolutely,
she is the virus that gets into the system.
Yeah, so like when her aunt and her counselor sort of accuse her of being that they're not entirely wrong. The problem they have is intentionality, right? It's agenda. She doesn't actually have an agenda. She's a passive carrier of the disease, as it were. But that's really fascinating, because that notion of architecture being corrupted, or of being reflective, like in a symbolic way of what's going on within it, or of other forces, of something that's abstract, is something that occurs throughout horror fiction, right? It's something we've discussed many, many times. It's the Overlook Hotel. It's the House of Usher. It just recurs again and again and again. And using like a modernist building to recall that, to refer back to the Gothic tradition, is really fascinating. I really like that.
Yeah, it's a really good idea, and the use of mirrors in particular, and the repeated refrain of the mirrors being cracked as well. I mean, that's specifically like, it's a flaw or an opening or a crack in the fabric of the building, and therefore in the fabric of the information, if you want to look at it that way. And the way that the mirrors reflect things that aren't there. So in effect, we're seeing the inner nature, the corrupted inner nature of the building in its fabric as well. in some incredibly clever shots. Those shots that you were talking about in the corridor with the multiple canes looking out of the doors, and it's not happening in the actual corridor, but it's happening in the reflection. Those are not actually special effects shots. I don't know how the bloody hell they did it, but those are actually, they're practical shots.
I know,
they actually
right?
did that somehow.
They did it
That's
in
really
shot as well,
clever.
didn't they? It's not in post, right? There's only one or two
exactly.
little things that are done in post, like that silly lightning strike at the end. That's done in post, but everything else is done in camera. I mean that makes this film. For me, that lends it a dimension and an artistry and a craft that is so worthy of appreciation. Even when it doesn't really work, it's like they attempted it. They tried to do this to do it in front of the camera. That's bonkers. Actually, that is. I don't know how they convinced like the studio to let them do that.
Well, it's real directorial passion and fascination and experimentation. So there's real, and this is the thing, you can tell it does, it lends the shot a very unsettling verisimilitude, because even the best effects, and and we were talking about how great the effects were in the original, the spectre outside the bedroom door is one of my favorite effects in all cinema, one of my favorite ghosts in all cinema, but it's still visibly an effect, and that's fine. But that shot where something deeply uncanny and threatening is happening, and there's nothing overlaid on top of the material picture you're looking at. You're just looking at what is very obviously an unfiltered material picture. That really does lend it a disturbing quality that's quite unique, really.
Well, we're not used to it, are we? I mean, we're very unused to it. Even in horror cinema, we're very unused to it because people just don't do it. And, for good practical reasons, they don't do it, because it's really, really difficult. And if it goes wrong, you've got to set up the whole damn thing again and do it again and again and again. It's very, very hard to get that kind of thing right. So, it does lend it a certain unique quality. There is something about this film that I think it elevates it beyond what it otherwise would be, and it's just that unspoken quality as a result of that decision to do things in camera, to do things in front of the camera. That shot in particular, I mean, we're going to harp on about this because it is probably the best sequence in the film, isn't it? The multiple canes in the reflections, opening the doors and then closing the doors as I think it's the eldest daughter walks up the corridor, right? It's beautiful. I mean, just take it in isolation from this film, just as a sequence. It's just phenomenal. It's a phenomenal piece of like visual artistry, and I love it to bits. I mean, Kane's an interesting one in this film. Obviously, no more Julian Beck, because he sadly passed away even before Poltergeist 2 was released, so we never got to see it. Sadly, I never got to see the work, which is a real shame given what an absolute tour de force he is in that film. So obviously you've got a body double here. There's a lot of like prosthetic makeup to try and make the actor look like Julian Beck, and I believe it's Corey Burton who provides the voice. Corey Burton, who like some of the people listening to this will recognize that name. Corey Burton was in, if you can name a cartoon from the 1980s and the 1990s, he was in it. He was in it. He's in everything. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I believe he was one of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Transformers, played Shockwave and multiple others. Mask, he was in that. He was in everything. Everything you could possibly imagine, and he still is often reprising those roles. He's come back as Shockwave in Transformers a couple of times. I believe he played Megatron in one of the more recent Transformers cartoons. He's in everything, and it's amazing to me. I'm reading it on Wikipedia. I was having the same slightly squee moment that I had when I realized that the Predator in Predator, the voice of the Predator, is played by the guy who plays Optimus Prime in the original Transformers cartoon.
Yeah. It reminds me a bit of when I realized that Immortan Joe in Fury Road is being played by the same actor that plays the guy in the first Mad Max film as well.
Right. It's brilliant, isn't it? I just love that. I love that to bits. I mean, it's a real pity that obviously Julian Beck isn't here. So they try to make Kane a bit different in this film. He's a bit more of a distant entity, and that's you know, that actually works really well with the mirrors, because he is obviously operating on another level of reality that's sort of seeping in and infecting this one. He
Well, if you want to
doesn't.
go with the like corrupted hard drive metaphor, you could look upon this version of Kane as like an autonomous copy. You know,
Yes,
it's
yes.
not the same entity as per entity that we met in the second film. It's like the same information in a slightly degraded copy that's gotten its way into the building, so to speak.
Well, I think that works very nicely with the metaphysics that's certainly set up in Poltergeist 2, because in Poltergeist 2, it's not outright stated, but you can certainly infer that what that thing, the demonic thing that is harassing the Freeling family, is not necessarily the Reverend Henry Kane, right? It's what was pupated in him from his actions in life. You know, the malevolence, the hideous torture and torment that he inflicted on those people. It's whatever abstract thing was born from that on the other side, because it's established that's what happens, right? When you die, you become an abstract of yourself, depending on what you were in life. So
it's
that
like it's like you know, it's not the ghost of Jim Jones. It's like
right.
the entity that was created by the fusion of Jim Jones and the mass murder stroke suicide at Jonestown. It's like some sort of conglomeration of all the bad energy that happened as a result of Jim Jones, rather than just him as a ghost.
Exactly that. So the notion that this Kane isn't necessarily the demonic Kane that we face in Poltergeist 2 is entirely legitimate. That works really well. And it also works given his motivation, because his motivation is different in this film as well. He, in the original, in Poltergeist 2, he won't accept that he's dead, right? He just won't, he doesn't acknowledge that he's dead. In this one, he does. In this one, he wants to go into the light, right? That's why he wants Caroline. In fact, there's a more sympathetic element to Kane in this one. He, even when he talks to Caroline, he says, "You are the only one who can lead us. You're the only one who can take us into the light." So that there is something slightly different going on here. And you know, the ending, of course, it does have that. I mean, Kane kind of wins. You know, he gets what he wants at the end.
Yeah, he kind of does. Yeah, exactly.
Tangina sacrifices herself to take him into the light. So, yeah, I mean, okay, it's a little bit Deus Ex Machina, and you kind of do have to ask, like, well, she died quite early on in the film, so why didn't she just do that?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
But again,
just to cut through at that point.
Right, I'm not going to rag on it too much, you know, because again, I really like this film. I really do, and I do like Tangina in this film too. I think it's a nice sort of. She's kind of the hero of this film, you know. She's kind of like the redemptive element in this film, and I like that. I love that sequence, by the way, where Tom Skerritt's character and the aunt are trapped in the freezer. And you get that wall of water and moisture coming at them, and Tangina comes out of it to give them the MacGuffin, the necklace. I think it's a brilliant sequence. It's absolutely wonderful. It looks amazing.
See, that's another thing this film plays with that I've always been aesthetically fascinated with: ice and cold
ice,
and
right,
snow.
yeah, which is very different from everything that's gone before. I mean, like, the ghosts don't do that in the previous films, and the rationale here is that Tangina says it in a throwaway line. It's a complete throwaway line, because of course Tom Skerritt's character, he's the engineering manager of this building, right? He has to keep it functioning. He has to keep it going. So there's a problem with the heating. There's ice forming, and there's the structural problems. There are mirrors cracking and whatnot. And the reason there's a problem with the heating is that Kane and his sort of ghostly elements are leeching the heat to sort of power themselves, you know? I kind of like it. That's why the ice is forming. It's interesting.
It is. Again, they've hijacked the material of the building, and they're corrupting it. It's good. It's good.
I like the overlap. I like the overlap between the metaphysical and the physical as well. The notion that there is kind of like I don't know, they need like physical energy. So there is like that distinction that's made between the natural and the supernatural is kind of one of language only, right?
Well, this is one of the preoccupations of the entire series, funnily enough, which is the materiality of ghosts, if you like. You know, the ghosts in this entire series are very much not just spectral. I mean, we talked about this a bit in the last one. We talked about the first film having both spectral ghosts of the apparition type, but also ghosts are very physical. And I suppose that comes from the fact that the central concept of the entire thing right from the start is that this isn't a haunting as such. This is a poltergeist intrusion.
Absolutely.
Poltergeist intrusions are very, according to the legend of them, they are very physical things. They're about material objects flying around and stuff like that. So there's a very interesting interplay between as you said, the word is metaphysical. There's an interesting interplay between the spiritual, the spectral, the hauntological, and the very material. There's lots of goo and goop in these films.
There is. There's a lot in all of them, right?
Yeah,
there's flesh. There is flesh in these films. There's anatomy. There's sometimes they're hijacking it or they're adopting it, like when the tree comes to life or whatever, or when the puppet, the clown comes to life. Other times they're just creating it. It's just occurring. Like when the big hell mouth opens up in the bedroom in the first film, and it's this big fleshy, I don't know, sort of womb-like orifice that has a tongue coming out of it and whatnot. So they create flesh as well. That's really interesting to me.
The creature I always talk about, the sort of baying skull-faced thing with the long hair outside the door. That's so great because it's the fusion, because it is kind of spectral and ethereal, but it's also very material, and it's really on point the way they merge those things. And the third film, for all that it is very different in some respects from the previous two, it does pick up on that. And one of the interesting things about it is it takes that metaphysical idea of like the spectral, the ethereal, the spiritual manifesting in and by and through, and in some sense sort of corrupting or possessing material things. It takes it beyond just the body into the environment, the social, material and physical environment all around you. And it's actually a really interesting expansion of the central idea.
Thematically and like in terms of its symbolism, that is actually really interesting. And you know what? A third entry, like a third sort of like straight to video entry in a horror franchise from the 1980s doesn't really warrant having like thematic complexity like this. It's really punching above its weight, isn't it? This is not just another soulless cash-in sequel. It really wants to be something. It really wants you to engage with it. And it doesn't always succeed, but when it does, it really does. And I really do applaud it for that. I think it's a very interesting film indeed, and I enjoyed watching it a lot this time, I've got to say.
Yeah, absolutely. I prefer it to the second film. For all that the second film is good fun, I find the third film more interesting, and I do genuinely find it more sort of actually creepy, more actually spooky than I think either of the first two. Like one of my favorite sequences. It's really a very simple thing, but it's at one point the two sort of main teenagers, the daughter and her boyfriend, they kind of disappear.
Yes,
and then they both turn up again, and they seem perfectly normal. But then when nobody's looking, they change. And they have this moment where, and you don't know exactly, I mean, are they just aspects of Kane or aspects of the haunting or whatever that's taken on form of these kids? Or are they actually those kids kind of possessed, again, corrupted, like their information, their structure corrupted like the building? But it's a very simple scene. And they just have this, they exchange this look, this kind of look of amused malice between them. And they walk off, and again, it's a very simple shot, but you cut from them looking at each other and smiling in that evil way to a shot of the corridor, and they're walking up the corridor, and as they walk up into the frame, you realize they're only in the mirror. That is really
it's utterly brilliant. Actually, that whole sequence, it's where the psychiatrist bites the dust, isn't it? The daughter appears behind him when he sees Carol Ann in the lift, and she comes up behind him and pushes him like over the lift shaft, and he ends up dead. But there's this moment after that, which I find to be Clive Barkerian in its weirdness. It's absolutely brilliant, where they exchange a kiss and she reaches up and rips rips part of his face away, and it's rot underneath, and it's done as though it's a loving thing, as though it's like a wonderful thing. They both laugh as though it's like sensually interesting before they walk off, and that's my kind of shit. That's my kind of
that's
shit.
great.
The mixing of the sensual, and my interpretation, and this is just my interpretation of that, is these are two of the specters that are in Kane's caravan, if you like. They are, that are in his thrall, that were established in the second film, that have been given like license to come back by him as his agents, and they are enjoying the physicality of it. They're enjoying being material again, even if it's only for the moment.
My read is similar to that. I mean, I agree with you. It's a brilliant moment because it's very Barkerian and physical, and but my read is similar to that. I think they are absolutely kind of enjoying suddenly being physical beings with both pleasure and pain as part of that. But I think it's because they are actually the reflections. I think what has happened is that again, we've been talking about this all the way through. That we've been talking about scary movies together, right the way back to The Changeling. We were talking about Joseph, the ghost in The Changeling, using the house as kind of a recording mechanism, and himself being a recording. Well, the way I read it is that those entities, they are actually the reflections, because those kids have walked up and down the corridors, they've been in the mirrors, and the corruption of information, or the hijacking of the information of the structure of the building, has allowed whatever this force is to kind of record them in its fabric through their reflections, and it's pushed those reflections out of the mirrors into the real world. And then, of course, at the end, they go back into the reflective dimension.
Yeah, so it's like the stone tape, it is that very notion of the stone tape. So it's the recording becoming corrupted. I like that. I do like that. And I want a whole film or a whole story with that, about that stuff. I love the physicality, I love the sensuality of it, and I love the fact that it's Eros mixed with Thanatos, right? It is an erotic moment, but it's also it's between dead things. I love that shit. I think it's really interesting. I think
people die in this one, which isn't the case in the other two. I mean, the grandmother dies in the second one, but she dies in natural death.
She dies of natural causes. That doesn't count. That's not a body count.
But people get murdered in this one. They die horrible deaths. So there's a very different tone here, which
there's
I appreciate.
A physical threat in this one, right? Which there isn't in the previous films. That the threats are to sanity and to soul in the previous films, right? I mean, I think we mentioned this, and to family, obviously. We mentioned this, I think, or I may have mentioned it in my discussion with Justin Park, because this did come up. Funnily enough, I interviewed Justin Park for who's another horror writer, by the way, for Our Lives in Horror, and he wanted to bring us up for not talking about Poltergeist 3, so I had to sort of assure him, look, this was always the plan. This was always the plan, But it's the notion that I've lost my train of thought now. It's gone. No, what were we talking about, Jack? Remind me.
Oh, blimey.
Going.
I've forgotten now.
I've forgotten. I think it's gone.
I was listening, I promise.
I know. I got sidetracked by Justin Park. I'm so sorry. But no, I had to reassure him, because it's like, no, this was always going to be the plan. I absolutely promise you. But no, I mean, like, I was going to say something about Kane, and it's just gone from me. I'm afraid it's gone from me. It's flown the coop. But I would love to. I mean, Barker's probably written short stories that do involve something very like this. It wouldn't surprise me in the least. But that imagery, for me, again, it's an image that doesn't really belong in a film that's the second sequel to a popular horror franchise. It's almost like echoing Legion in this regard. It's way, 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 way better than it has any right to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But
where's the remake, I'm afraid.
Yeah. No,
the remake.
Yeah. I mean, wow, the remake. I didn't know it was made in 2015. I was really shocked
Yeah.
by that. I was genuinely shocked by that because of the film itself. The film itself is ironically anachronistic. We're
Yeah,
talking about films from like the 1980s, but this film is really anachronistic. It feels like a film from the early 2000s.
it really does. It's really enthralled to that. I mean, it's not quite as dark and dingy as blue filtered as some of these sorts of things, but
No,
it really does feel enthralled to that kind of omnipresent, smothering house style in which films were made circa 2005, 2006,
absolutely. Like
doesn't it?
the directorial style is reminiscent of that too. It's really
Yeah.
strange. It doesn't have any personality. It doesn't have anything to grasp onto. It feels like it's trying to be lots of different things and failing. It's trying to recall the original Poltergeist. It's trying to throw in. It does try to throw in a few ideas from Poltergeist 2 and 3 actually. Like there's the pool that the daughter's almost dragged into. That's from Poltergeist 3, right?
Mm.
But it just doesn't work. It's not
Again,
very good at
a
doing any of
reflective
them.
surface,
Yeah,
water as a reflective
right.
surface,
The
and a
reflective
portal.
yeah, and
Yeah.
a portal, yeah, and it's all very slick and it's all like very generally well done effects. There's some that are a bit too CG for their own bloody good, but it doesn't do anything at all that's remarkable or engaging or interesting. It has none of the charm. What really got me is there is no effort to create charm here. All the previous three films, all of them attempt it, and they often succeed. There is incredible charm with regards to the characters. There is heart in the dynamic. The interactions between them are just so interesting. You want to be around these characters. The first time I tried to rewatch this for the purposes of this podcast, I had to turn it off. It was making me angry. It was really it was really sticking in my craw. And the reason it was sticking in my craw is not because of any kind of like fidelity to the original. And I want to make that very clear from the off. It's not because it's a remake. There are loads of remakes I really like of lots of different things. That The Thing is technically it's not really a remake. It's another adaptation of the same story.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
you know what I mean. This annoyed me. One of the things that really annoyed me is the technical elements of it. So like we talked about the acting direction. In all the previous films, it's really good. It's really, really good. There is poetry and naturalism in the way the characters work and the way they interact with one another and the environment. There's never this thing where it's shrill and you want them to shut up. This film, every single sequence escalates to the actors all shouting at one another, over one another, and you can't hear a damn thing. And it was annoying me. It was like it was fingers on a chalkboard. It was like just shut up. This is not engaging cinema. This is cinema shouting at you, at the audience. It makes you feel like it's being hostile to you, and I really hated that.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. I mean, I want to give Sam Rockwell some credit for trying. Sam Rockwell, I think, really tries with his role to give this guy what's his name, Bowen, in this one.
Is it?
He really tries to give that character like a kind of feckless charm.
Yeah.
He tries to make him humorous and a little bit irresponsible and inclined to just push problems to one side, but essentially a really nice guy and charming, and he's really trying, but the material just isn't.
It's not there, is it? It's just not there, unfortunately.
He hasn't got any support. I mean, the child actors,
oh my god! I mean,
child actors, but they're not as good as the child actors.
And again, the script is really working against them. I find there's something really wrong with the script here. It does exactly what you said it was going to do in the previous conversation, which is it just introduces all of this forced tension that feels synthetic. So you've got the Robbie equivalent character. Now, in the original film, Robbie is a scared boy, but he's scared in the way that a boy would be and of things that a boy is generally scared of.
Yes.
It's the genuine fears of childhood, where the world is slightly unstable and uncertain before you've actually started to determine your certainties about the way the world is, and it feels really sincere. And that isn't the defining element of his character. In this film, it's got to be abnormal. It's got to be,
Yes.
actually, the kid, there's
Absolutely.
something wrong with him. It consumes him, and there is nothing else to him but this fear. And it's like, it doesn't work. It feels annoying. The Carol Ann character, what is going on there? She's an alien. She's the creepiest thing in it. She's like an emotionless alien. It's really weird.
Yeah, there's no. I mean, I'm not going to rag on a child actress, but it's the fault of the script.
It is the script. I mean, I want to make that very clear. Like in the original film, and I know you should view the film as what it is and what it's trying to be, rather than like what you want it to be. But in the original film, Carol Ann, she's the focus of all this weirdness, but she's actually a really cool character. She's a natural little girl. She has like the reactions of a natural little girl. She's funny and she's slightly perverse and she's slightly weird at times, but in a really natural way. And it's great. She works in the context of the family. Here, she feels like a cuckoo. She feels like some sort of like simulacrum alien that's been dropped into the family. She's like emotionless, she's vapid, she's still, and she doesn't emote at all. It's like, what is going on?
I think you're perfectly within your rights to compare it to the original, because it's calling itself a remake. It's calling itself by the same title. It's telling in a way the same, vestigially the same story. So what are we supposed to compare it to if not the original film? And the comparison is not flattering. I mean, as you say, Carol Ann is characterized. You get the whole thing. It goes out of its way to show us who she is, with the thing with the bird dying and the little funeral and all this stuff. And you get no effort really on the part of anybody to. It doesn't treat the children like they're people.
No,
this is something. We were kind of talking about this before we started talking about the movies, but this is a problem with our culture. We insist upon treating children like they're not people, and they are. And this is a really obnoxious manifestation of that set of assumptions.
Absolutely.
In a text here, and the thing you were talking about before with the little boy in the remake, that is the thing that I hate most about this. I hate it and despise it. I find it offensive.
Yeah.
Okay. That whole thing about the boy, because in the first film, Robbie is scared, and there's no stigma attached to that whatsoever. He's not abnormal. The film is not passing any judgment. No,
right.
The father doesn't pass judgment on him. The mother doesn't pass judgment on him. The film doesn't pass judgment on him.
Right.
None of the other adults pass judgment on him. He's being a perfectly normal kid. He's completely within his rights to feel the way he feels. And actually, he's the one who first comes up with the idea about how to get Carol Ann back.
Yeah,
so there's
right.
The film is not. The remake has this whole thing. I mean, again, as you say, it introduces mindless, unnecessary tension and conflict. It brings in this idea that they've got money worries. Nothing happens.
The father feels unfulfilled and inadequate, and it's like that. That's the thing. There's no chemistry between any of them. Any of them, they're not.
The actress playing the mother or the wife, she's really phoning it in. She might as well not be there. I'm sure she's good at her job elsewhere, but she's not bothering at all here. She's got no chemistry with Rockwell.
They kind of feel like they know what they're in, right? They kind of feel like, right, this is a job. This is something that was decided by committee. They're just trying to make a buck with this. So we'll say our lines, and we'll do the moments, and then we'll go. We'll cash our checks and we'll go. That's what it feels like. That's what it feels like all the way through. There is no emotion here. There's no sincerity, and that saturates the film. It completely saturates the film. It doesn't feel like it wants to tell a story. It doesn't feel like it wants to do anything. It vaguely clearly understands that, this moment is in the original Poltergeist, so we've got to put this in there somehow. This moment is in the original Poltergeist, so we've got to kind of put this in there somehow. Oh, the ghosts come through the TV. Oh, we'll do that, but we'll make it way more overt and like much less creepy and interesting. And also, I mean, like, this was in 2015. Thematically, the TV in 1988 has this whole raft of symbolism tied up with like its critique of neoliberalism and corporate culture, and all of that is there. All of that is there. Here it means fuck all. It means fuck all. This is 2015. What was happening in 2015 with media streaming services? Can you imagine if they adapted the Poltergeist mythology for that?
Yeah.
Oh,
but they don't do anything with 2015 media, with the strange and in many ways inherently uncanny things that are starting to happen to our entire experience of social and cultural life through devices. Television.
I thought at one moment they were going to do it. I thought when the eldest daughter who's on a phone and the phone starts to go wibbly. I thought what they were going to do is start with that notion of like augmented reality that you get through phones now, like augmented reality games where you can you can turn on your camera and look through the camera and you can play games. You can there are haunting experiences where you can see ghosts and things. There was that Pokemon Go where you could hunt Pokemon who were out in the environment. They could have used that. They could have done something with that and made it the commentary on augmented reality using the Poltergeist mythos. Amazing. That could have worked really, really well, but they don't.
Nobody's interested in doing, because the first film is interesting because it's interested in the way in which society and culture and the nuclear family and the new media, the 24-hour television and stuff like that, the way these things interact and the way in which they do open up this sort of uncanny space in family life and social. The remake's not interested in that at all. It's just like it just imports the static on the big television screen. That's it. From the first film, and it's just sat there like it's just a floating signifier. It doesn't mean anything.
That's
it's just
exactly
there because
it.
It was in the first film.
And
but
by its very nature, it breaks verisimilitude because you know as the audience, especially if you are from the if you were around when the original Poltergeist came out, it's a wink, isn't it? It's like, ah, look what we're doing. This is Poltergeist. You know this, don't you? It's like
I think like static TVs, they weren't even a thing by 2015. I mean, you didn't see that anymore, did you?
No, you didn't.
It's an anachronism.
It's an anachronism,
the film is not unaware of the fact that the Poltergeist story is very tied up with media. It opens with like pixels, and you zoom out, and it's a computer game, and the computer game is it's got zombies in it, and that's a promising opening. But
it does nothing with it.
It doesn't do anything with it at all.
It goes nowhere with it, right? Online video gaming. I mean, like, what could they have done with that? Online spaces is the alternative of the mirrors in Poltergeist 3. That's the way you get into the spiritual realm. That's how they come through. Oh, they could have done so much. They could have done so much with this, and it's.
It just feels like a team of Hollywood writers who are there for the check, going down a checklist. What do scripts have to have in them? So it's putting in tension between the husband and wife, and and it puts these things in. And as we were saying, they've got money worries, and he spends money he shouldn't spend, and she's not content being a mother in the home and stuff like this. And it's just there because it's on somebody's checklist of things you have to put in. It doesn't mean anything. Nothing happens with it.
The eldest daughter, oh my God, she may as well have been written by like a Reddit-dwelling incel. She's a teenage girl, therefore she's a bitch. That's her whole character. That is,
and she only cares about her phone. And
it's so misogynistic. I mean, that's actually something this film does, which I noticed this afternoon when I rewatched the whole thing. I forced myself to sit and rewatch the whole thing. It removes all the female agency. From the film in 1988.
Yeah, this is an intensely female series of films. All the films, the original films, the first three, remember that. I mean, the first film, most of all, it's driven by females. It's the little girl that's abducted. The mother is the lead character, and then you have Dr. Lesh and you have Tangina, and and it's the mother that goes. It's intensely female driven. And the second film with the grandmother, We talked a little bit about this. There's almost a kind of women against patriarchy thing represented by Cain, and even in the third film, that's still there. But in this, it's almost like overt and deliberate political reaction. You know, it's like, well, we're going to take this thing that is inherently a female story and we're going to correct it by making it about male heroics.
Yeah, and we're also going to diminish every female character in it.
Yeah,
completely like diminish them.
The Dr. Lesh analog becomes like the ex-wife, the bitter ex-wife,
right?
The Tangina analog, who is now a man.
That was a man. I mean, Jared Harris, I love you, man. Oh, I love you to bits, but what are you doing?
Yeah. I love Jared Harris.
I adore that man. I think everything he's in, he elevates. Everything he's in, he elevates. But even he can't save this train wreck, I'm afraid.
No, he lifts the movie just by being there. But even so, he's phoning it in as well. He's getting
he doesn't give a toss. I mean, there's all this stuff that's like one of the things that's really underbaked is his status. Like the eldest daughter recognizes him from some web show or something, but you never see the damn web show.
No,
you never see it. It's like
it's just crowbarred in again,
right? I don't, and she keeps saying to him, "I'll say the line," which is of course Tangina's line, which is "This house is clear." And it's like, well, you never see him saying it in any video or anything, so it doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, and it doesn't go anywhere, and there's no point in it being in there except that it's a reference to the first film recontextualized. So
I'm sorry,
okay,
I'm shouting, I'm getting angry. I do apologize.
No. Please, I totally get it. I mean, this film makes me shout as well. But what does the audience get out of that? The audience goes, "Oh yeah, I remember that line from the first film." That's it. That's all it's there for. That's all it achieves.
Yeah.
But yeah, this film is very reactionary in the sense that it does reconquer the series for sort of male agency. It makes it about the males, and it's and this ties in with like the checklist of things that they have to put in for no reason at all, like the so-called character arcs. You know, everybody has to have a character arc because that's just
like the boy, for example, where he
exactly. This is where I'm going.
Oh.
It's just it's in the handbook, you know, like with how to write scripts, you know, and the handbook is right. You have to have this here. So all these writers are just putting this together from like script writing Lego, you know, obeying the instruction manual. So you've got to have a character arc. So what are they? And because it's in this weird project of sort of making it male led instead of female led, they give it to the little boy. And what do you end up with? You end up with this thing I was talking about before, which is the thing I hate most about this film, and I find it actually enraging and offensive. Which is you get this storyline, this running theme throughout the movie of the little boy being nervous and scared, and it's treated as shameful. The parents they're annoyed with him, they're ashamed of him, they're worried about him because there's something, they perceive him as having something wrong with him, and it's like this stigmatization of weakness. He's not enough of a man, he's not male enough, he's not stoic enough, he's not butch enough. He won't be normal until he's not scared of fucking giant rats in his bedroom, for fuck's sake. Who wouldn't be scared of that?
Quite frankly.
And he's not, he has to prove, I mean, firstly, it's thuddingly predictable. They make this meal of him being scared or cowardly in the start. You just know, I see, by the end he's going to be brave, and that's going to
have a redemptive moment.
Like, you're going to and it just feels like this machine chugging along in these pre-laid tracks. It's so fucking boring and predictable, but it's deeply offensive because it's like, oh no, he's actually a valid human. He's actually a valid male human being after all, because he's brave. And it's like, firstly, what the supposed cowardice that he's depicted as having, it's not cowardice at all. It's normal fears that anybody would have, let alone a small boy, that are being stigmatized by apparently his parents and everybody else, who kind of views him with contempt for having any kind of weakness at all. But by the end of the film's saying, no, it's okay, he's actually a valid human being because he's not a coward. And that is so reactionary, and it's reactionary, spirited.
It's toxically masculine, it's repulsive, it's repulsive.
It's disgusting. It disgusts me.
And it's stigmatizing children, I really hate, and it's the polar opposite of what you get in the film from 1982.
Absolutely.
The polar opposite, where all of Robbie's fears are accommodated. They are the natural fears of childhood, of a developing mind and imagination that's uncertain about the world. And the way his father reacts to it is by being supportive and affectionate, and by giving him a mechanism by overcoming them, by accommodating them, not by stigmatizing him, not by having round the table discussions about, oh, that boy's weird, there's something wrong with him. It's none of that. It's none of that. This film is hostile to its characters, but expects us to like them.
I got to say this. I hope this doesn't offend anybody, least of all you. But there are bits where I feel like any minute now the parents are going to start saying, "Is he gay?"
Right. No, you're absolutely right. It is verging on that, isn't it? It's verging on that. There is this contempt for femininity in this film. Right, or for prescriptions of femininity, which of course gay men are stigmatized with, and it manifests in the boy. Interestingly, in the eldest boy child, because he's not living up to the standards, right? And funnily enough, the father isn't either. By his own preconceptions, the reason he is sort of tormented and he has problems is because he's not living up to a prescription of masculinity either. And it's, oh my God, I hate it. I really, I mean, this time round, I reacted very, 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 very violently to this film. I didn't the first time. I just forgot it the first time round. It just did. I had no traction for me at all. It was like Teflon, But this time around, I found it contemptuous. I found it like a hideous piece of work on so many levels.
No, I don't want to give anybody the wrong idea. Like, my predominant feeling towards this film is just, crashing waves of boredom. It's incredibly tedious.
Yeah, it is.
Like the whole, none of the scares land. The ridiculous CGI tree reaching its long tentacle down the corridor.
You know what I love about the tree sequence? They're embarrassed by it. They know it's supposed to be in there. But whereas the first one just goes for it, it's like, it's a big Muppet monster tree. Yeah, go for it. Have it grab the kid and try to eat him, brilliant. Yeah. And then it's going to get sucked up into a whirlwind just to, put the cherry on top of that sundae. Here, it's afraid. It's like trying to tiptoe around it. Oh, it might be the storm, and that's why the twigs are hitting the top of the roof, and it's like it's so synthetically set up as well. The tree stands just so that the twigs come down over that particular ceiling with the glass window. Oh, it's like, fuck off, honestly.
Instead of one clown, which is realistically the sort of thing that somebody might design for a child, and which is actually, when you look at it, fucking creepy. Instead, we have 10 toy clowns that are there for no reason at all in a secret compartment.
They're an avalanche, right?
Yeah, they're all explicitly designed as scary clowns. Like, they're not just clowns and are therefore scary under certain situations. They are just scary clowns. Like, somebody designed these to be scary, and that's all it does. It kind of says, look, here are scary clowns, because scary clowns are in the first film, aren't they? It's another one of those winks. It's copying The Conjuring as well. It's trying to do Annabelle.
Yes, yeah. I mean, you are absolutely right. It's not tied up, is it? That arc is not tied up. Why are they there?
They're there because it's 2015 and somebody wants to do their version of Annabelle, and they did it with the clown from because that's in the first film. That's it. They could have at least thrown in some line about how, like, the previous tenant was a bit odd and made clown dolls or something, or something like that. They could have thrown something in there, but they don't. It's just there. And it expects the audience to take it. Again, it's this kind of hostility this film has towards its audience. It treats you with such contempt. Exactly. It's just going, this is a spooky movie, ergo there's a secret compartment full of scary clowns. That's good enough for you, isn't it? You'll eat that up, won't you? Yeah, we know you like that because you liked it in the first film. Yeah, and you like Annabelle, don't you? So there you go. Actually, that'll do you. No, I don't. But that's what the film is thinking. You know?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. That is exactly it. It's all of this sort of like, it's this aesthetic of signs and signifiers that don't mean anything. That
Yeah,
don't go
yeah,
anywhere, that have no anchorage or no weight. And when it does have weight, it's accidental and it's execrable. It's all this sort of like replacing the female agency with dubious masculine agency. It's terrible. I mean, it is
yeah.
flat out terrible.
This is what I was saying. My dominant feeling towards it is just boredom, because it's just boring. There's,
Yeah.
it has nothing interesting going on in it. It has nothing scary going on in it. It's just tedious. But when you stop to think about what's going on, it's actively offensive.
Yeah,
Particularly
you're
the
right.
subplot with the little boy. And
You're
it's interesting that
absolutely right.
another film that it's deeply in debt to is Insidious,
Yes,
which was quite a big hit 4 or 5 years earlier. And the interesting thing about that is that Insidious is deeply indebted to Poltergeist.
Yes, yeah.
And Insidious kind of already did the rewriting Poltergeist to make it about male heroics thing.
Absolutely, absolutely. And yeah, I mean, I
That's a
have
very similar thing. It's the
you know,
father that goes in to get the little boy back out of the
Yes.
analog of the alternate, dimension or whatever.
Mhm.
And whatever you think about Insidious, it does at least have kind of it has a sense of humor, and you get the feeling that the director and the writer are engaged with the material. You get the feel that they're enthusiastic. Whereas this is just a copy of Insidious, with the reactionary politics ramped up to 110, and with no real enthusiasm or interest from anybody.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, Insidious, it's fine. It's okay. It's one of those films where I've watched it once. I probably won't ever watch it again, and I probably won't remember it in like 5 years' time. But it's infinitely better than this. It's infinitely better because it is at least it wants to tell a story. At least it actually does have ideas of what it wants to be. This is one of those things we've talked about many, many times before. It's not a story. It's not a story. It is not a story. It is something that has been cobbled together around a board meeting, where people have said, "Oh, Poltergeist, that's one that hasn't been done yet, has it? That's got an audience. Let's just throw that together. We don't really need to throw too much at it, do we?" Nah.
Yeah, it's a pre-existing property. We've got the rights to it. It's made money before. We make something for relatively cheap.
Yeah.
And we stick that brand name on it. We'll probably make money from that, and we'll just farm it out to whatever jobbing director needs a job at the moment, and hopes one day to be doing work that he gives a shit about for us.
Exactly that. Well, that's it, isn't it? That's it. Nobody gives a shit. Nobody cares. Nobody takes the material sincerely or seriously. It is just like horror film by numbers. This could have been created by an AI. If you just fed them all the horror films from like the early 2000s, from 2000 to 2010, this could have been cranked out.
Yeah. Yeah, there are. You want to check, how many fingers Jared Harris has got.
Yes, exactly that. Although, given how chewed up that character is, he may have a few missing anyway. God, and I mean, even when it seems like it's going to do something interesting, when it actually goes into the spirit dimension and it looks like it's about to become interesting, it could have done stuff with that, and it doesn't.
No, they just walk around in there and then they come out again, don't they?
They come out again, right? There's no weight to anything. There's no like longevity. No. In the original film, when Carol Ann goes missing, she goes missing. She goes missing for a long time. Yeah. And it's a real thing. It's got real weight to it. It's a powerful, powerful situation. And this is another thing this film does, by the way. It tries to explain fucking everything.
Yes.
Like in the original film, they don't even talk about like going to the police, right? They don't even talk about going to the police because this film is so self-conscious. Oh well, in the original film, they don't ask about, they don't even think about going to the police. That's a bit weird. That's a plot hole, isn't it? We should explain that. We should have them talking about that.
It's got that terror of fan criticism. There's a really great Lindsay Ellis video that she did about the live-action remake of Beauty and the Beast.
Yes, I saw that one.
You know what I'm talking about then.
I know
she talks about how it's it reeks of having been the remake, the live action remake reeks of having been written by people who are steeped in the half-assed fan criticism. You know,
Yes.
Belle is a victim of Stockholm syndrome and all that sort of crap. You know, that lowest common denominator Tumblr quote unquote criticism, and it's written by people who are not only aware of that, but are for some reason bothered by it. So the remake is full of like explanations and lampshading about things that supposedly don't make sense in Beauty and the Beast.
In Beauty and the Beast, like a fairy tale, right? A fairy tale where all the characters are archetypes. You don't need them to have Freudian motivation. You know, they don't have to have backgrounds. They're archetypes. They work mythologically. That's the whole point, right? I mean, this is a tangential rant, but she is absolutely right about that film. I mean, I love the original Disney Beauty and the Beast. I think it's a really beautiful piece of work. I think they did a fantastic job with it. I love the way that it's kind of like the inversion of the Little Mermaid that was the previous film. Like, even if you look at Gaston and he's Prince Eric buffed up, he's actually the dark side of the Disney prince, right? Which I really like. I think that's it's a really clever thing to do. The live action remake does this thing where everyone has to have a motivation. Everyone has to have a backstory. So Gaston, he fought in a war and he has PTSD. That's why he's a dick. You know, that's why he's a bad person. So I don't want to know.
Well, I mean, that's insulting, firstly to people that do suffer from PTSD.
Yes.
PTSD doesn't necessarily, it's got nothing inherently to do with toxic masculinity. There's no link there. And that's what Gaston's actually about. They wouldn't have had, I don't think they would have had that term, certainly not in wide currency when they made the Disney movie. But that's what he is. He's a picture of toxic masculinity. And then the film is about, who can maturate their way out of that and who can't, but the remake is so conscious of this sort of half-assed Tumblr criticism, that it makes Belle into a girl boss and with anachronistic lean-in feminism and all this sort of crap, and explains why why everything in the castle that you use for anything isn't a member of staff transmuted. This hairbrush is just a hairbrush. So these are not questions that we need answered.
We don't need to know. It dilutes the fairy tale. It dilutes the mythology of it.
I tell you,
just tell us a sincere fairy story, please, God.
And I'll tell you precisely why they have to do that lampshading, why they don't call the police thing in the Poltergeist remake, right? Because Carol Ann, in the remake, Carol Ann disappears before the mum and dad have seen anything supernatural.
Yeah.
In the original, mum and dad are already aware that there's stuff going on in the house.
Yes. There's no question. There's no tension. It's just there, right? It's wonderful.
So when Carol Ann disappears, they know. I mean, firstly, because of the circumstances into which she disappears, but also because of the stuff that's been going on that they're already aware of. They know that it's a supernatural disappearance. So you don't need to explain why they don't go to the police. Of course they don't go to the police. Yeah. Whereas in this, it's been ham-fistedly written in such a way that Carol Ann disappearing, or whatever the girl's name is in the remake, it's almost like the first thing that happens. So they have no context for it. So why the hell? It's not just that they explain when they don't need to. There actually isn't a good explanation in the remake for why they don't call the police straight away.
No, you're right. It's so weird, isn't it? And also, by the way, that dinner scene where they are, where the mum and dad are, it serves no function. It's only there to ham-fistedly like jar in that detail that, oh, by the way, did you know your house is on a burial ground? That's it.
Yeah.
It's
just crowbar that.
Yeah. As though, like, you know what? We know this. People who haven't seen Poltergeist know this, because that concept has been, it's become part of the cultural zeitgeist, right? We understand that story. You don't really need it.
You don't need it in the remake because you don't have the final act thing with the coffins bursting out the ground.
No, you're right. You're absolutely right. It doesn't.
So why put it in there at all?
I know. And why have this entire scene where it just like none of those characters turn up again? The ones who are at the dinner party, none of them turn up again.
Yeah.
And it's weird. It's like, it's weird in a bad way. It's incongruous. It's like,
whereas in the first film, nothing, it doesn't waste any time with it, but you have the neighbor characters and you see them 3 or 4 times throughout the movie, and they get kind of, there's a kind of a little arc in the relationship between the Freelings and
really
their
funny,
neighbors.
actually. It's really funny the way it's played when Steve and Diane go to their door and they're kind of like they don't know what to say, and like, Diane is laughing and because she's so embarrassed, and they're self-conscious and they don't know what they're. It's so good, and the deadpan neighbor who's like, what are you doing? It's brilliant. I love that. I love it so much. It's just a little moment of comedy with its own little arc,
And then at the end you get them, they turn up and they help her get out of the swimming pool in the mud, but then they're useless to help her get the kids out of the house. And then you kind of see them one more time as the Freelings are abandoning the house and the house is crunching up. It doesn't add anything except that it's just a human detail. It makes the world feel inhabited. There's no, like, the house doesn't look like a human house in the remake. It doesn't look like it's lived in. Like in the first film, the kids have their toys everywhere. They have posters for films. They have Star Wars toys everywhere. It feels, and the kitchen is full of, recognizable human details. There's utensils left out on the
stuff,
the house in the remake, it doesn't, it looks like a series of fake rooms in a showroom, in a furniture showroom, complete with plastic fruit and plastic books. That's what it looks like.
It's as synthetic as the rest of the film, isn't it? And that's not to say there's any deliberate poetry in this film at all, by the way. That is not like a theme. That's an error. It's a mistake.
Exactly.
It may sound like we're being really hyperbolic about this, but no, to be honest, this is the sincere emotion that this aroused this time round. I hated it. I absolutely hated it. Everything about it. And not, I want to make it is wretched. I mean, I want to make it very clear when I talk about like the child characters, I'm not ragging on the child actors. They've got nothing to work with. The adult actors have got nothing to work with here. There's no grounding, there's no anchorage, there's no dynamism between the characters. And for a Poltergeist film to do that, the core of all the previous films has been the characters and their interactions with one another. That's the heart of it, right? None of it's here. None of it's here. All of that wonderful maternal stuff between the parapsychologist and Diane, that's brilliant in the first film. It kind of comes out of nowhere, but it's wonderful. It makes her warm, and it makes the character, who was only in it for a few scenes, she's not in it for very long, it makes her so engaging. And it strengthens Diane as a character. It's really cool. And it strengthens that whole sort of the feminist angle that the first film has as well. It really does.
Yeah. And the first film even characterizes Dr. Lesch's 2 assistants. There's the 2 guys that come with her to the house, and it doesn't waste its time with them. They're not given artificial character arcs that go nowhere or anything like that. But you know exactly who both those guys are.
Absolutely.
You just, from the way they look and the way the actors give their performances and the sorts of things they do, you know who those guys are. And you have the analog characters in the remake, and you have one of them, the woman, she's just a blank space.
I can't even remember what she looks like. I can't even remember what she looks like.
She's just there. And you have the other character, the young man, who's kind of a dick.
Just an unpleasant character, right? I mean,
for no reason at all.
That's the thing. This film doesn't understand. It knows that these characters kind of exist in the original film. Like the one helper, the one sort of aide in the original film, he's a little bit more skeptical than the others. He asks the questions, but he's not an asshole about it.
No.
He just says it could be a recording, there's a possibility of that. They're just eliminating the potentials, as any good researcher would do. In this, he has to be a hostile prick to the boy, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's it comes from that incredibly cynical, lazy way of looking at writing and characterization, where you think it's all about hostility and conflict. Drama is all about conflict. So in order to do drama, what you do is you have one character being a dick to another character, That's just what
right.
drama is.
Yeah,
You know?
that's what dialogue
No,
is, right? It's like,
no.
oh God, yeah. The original, I mean, not to harp on about it, but like the certainly the first two Poltergeist films just demonstrate the utter lie of that, the utter
Yeah,
falsity of that, because
yeah,
there's no synthetic tensions in the Freeling family at all.
no.
There's none. And even when they do introduce tensions, like in the second film, they make sense because of the stuff that happened in the first film.
Well, you get moments of tension, and when they arise, they're interesting in
Yeah,
terms of characterization. You get
yeah.
the one. I mean, we talked about this. You get the wonderful little moment when Tangina asks who disciplines the
Oh,
children, and
yes, yeah.
you get that little moment where Diane says, "Well, Stephen decides to," and Stephen reacts very touchily to that. He doesn't
Yeah.
like it. So you
No.
get. But it's a moment of friction, and it comes directly from who these two people are, and it tells you stuff about them. You
Yeah,
know,
and it's really
and
wonderful. I mean, it's really wonderful. It's
you get the initial suspicion that Stephen has for Tangina, and it leads to a wonderful little character moment for them both, which
Mhm.
tells you that Tangina really has the gift,
Yeah,
and it's one of the most memorable interactions in the film. It's there and it's understandable and it serves its purpose, and then
yep,
it's laid aside because it's
that's it.
done what it needs to do.
It's
It
established,
has a
right?
reason to be there. Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas here, it's so much more thorny and sharp and unpleasant, isn't it? It's that's the thing about this film. It's unpleasant to experience. It feels jagged. It feels like every interaction is barbed, and not in a natural way. Even you can get away with that. You can totally get. There are entire pieces of work that are built around that, but this doesn't feel sincere.
Yeah, this isn't a film about tension or arguments or friction in the same way that Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf is, or
Right.
12 Angry Men, or anything like that.
Right.
It's just there for the sake of it. As I say, it's just the Hollywood script writing manual.
Yeah.
On page 17, you add this thing, and
Yeah. Oh.
yeah, if you're treating writing like assembling a pre-designed Lego model according to the instruction manual, then yeah, fine. And
Yeah.
you don't care what it looks like. Yeah, okay.
Right. But don't dare call yourself a writer, right? Don't dare. You may as well be an AI bot. You may as well be. And that's what this
Yeah,
feels like. It feels like it's produced by something inhuman.
yeah,
And therefore it has no humanity. It has no
yeah,
humanity. It has no emotion. And it feels like the anti-art, doesn't it? Like the anti-cinema.
yeah. And I think it's really instructive to talk about these two films together, Poltergeist 3
Yeah.
and the remake, because Poltergeist 3 is generally considered to be the nadir of the original series,
Yeah.
and it is a film with lots of flaws and lots of problems. It was made on the cheap, it was made under
Yep.
difficult circumstances, etc. There's problems with the script writing, etc., etc. And it is a less than triumphant piece of work. I think we agree on that.
Totally.
But it
Yeah.
is nonetheless, it feels like an actual work of art in the
Yeah.
sense that it is, people are interested in things, they are invested in things, there are things they're trying to do with it, there are things they're trying to achieve, there are things they're trying to convey, there is passion there,
Yes.
there is interest there. And Poltergeist 3 made for a lot more money, no doubt, and it's just empty. It's just this black box,
Yeah.
because nobody gave a shit at any stage about anything except creating an hour and a half long reel of footage that could be used to bring some punters into the cinema and flog some merchandise.
Exactly that. I'm so glad I didn't go to see this at the cinema. I would have been furious. I would have been furious. I might have even walked out. This might have been one of those rare pieces of work where I left before it was finished. And I sat through Alien versus Predator Requiem, and that I'm telling you, ooh, yeah, it's bad. It's not even that kind of bad where I would recommend it as an example of what not to do. It's just such a negative experience. It has that sort of that enervating quality. It saps your energy,
Yeah, this is boring and empty.
Yeah, boring,
and
empty.
soulless.
Yeah, ironically, for a film that deals with the paranormal and the metaphysical, completely soulless. There's no consideration of its mythology because nobody takes it seriously. Nobody actually cares.
What the fuck is the end about? Thing at the end where is going on there?
I,
Well, they
I
go to look at another house,
right.
and there's a tree in the garden, so they just comedically leave. Like, doesn't make any fucking
It
sense.
doesn't
And
make any sense.
it's obviously meant to be their version of the end of the first film, where they go to the motel and Stephen chucks the TV out the door, which makes complete sense in terms of his characterization and in terms of what's been happening to them, and even in terms of how the haunting works in the film, right? Whereas this joke at the end of the remake, it's like an advert joke. You know those jokes you get in adverts that aren't really jokes, they're just joke shaped.
Yes.
They're just that things happen, and what's happening isn't a joke. It's somebody at the advertising agency saying, right, this is the bit where you laugh. It's just that.
It makes no sense. It's badly timed. It's badly executed. It's baffling. It's utterly baffling. Like, I don't really understand it. I understand what they're trying to do, but it's so badly put together that it's also one of those many moments in the film where it is telling you it's a film, that it's a synthetic situation, that it's not real. And again, breaking verisimilitude completely. This is a film. It's synthetic. These are actors. This is a set,
Yeah, this is another thing. It's tonally all over the place. That sort of cheekiness with form and self-awareness of form. You can do that in comedy, right? In fact, that's part of the mainstay of film and television comedy, is sort of playing around with the form that you're in. It's out of place in this film, but it's part of this weird tonal incoherence, because the film starts very much with this tone of self-seriousness, and then sort of just over halfway through, somehow, for some reason, it kind of coincides with Jared Harris turning up. Suddenly you've got wisecracks and jokes.
And these weird, slightly postmodern references that come through largely through the eldest daughter, who, by the way, has been almost absent for like half an hour of runtime. And it makes no sense. It's all over the place. Like, the jokes don't land because they're given no context. It's this whole thing of like Jared Harris apparently having this like Tangina's catchphrase of this house is clear. There's no context for it. If you'd have seen her watching one of his videos on her phone prior to this, that would have made sense. At least it would have established it. But it's
why you establish that the daughter likes this show and this presenter so that she can be the one that calls him in or suggests calling him in. No, she just happens coincidentally to be a fan of this guy that somebody else then calls in.
It's so bad, isn't it? It's so bad. It's robbing like the characters of any agency. Like, she's pointless. She is utterly pointless. You could take her out of the film and it makes hardly any difference at all.
She's in there so that you can have a pretty girl in the trailer.
That's it. And also so you can have this bizarre, slightly misogynist thing going on where, she's a teenage girl, therefore she's evil. She is like the devil, she's a bitch.
I want a new phone. You can't have a new phone because we're poor. I hate you.
Yeah, exactly that. It's, oh my God. Wow. Yeah. If I were I would be so insulted by this.
Yeah. Well, I'm insulted. I mean, it absolutely is like sexist and reactionary in the way it rewrites the franchise to be fundamentally about men instead of women. That's true, but it's also insulting to men, as I say. It's insulting to boys. The way the boy is treated, and this sort of undertone where nobody quite says it, but you feel like any minute now somebody's going to say he's a sissy, he's a
bit effeminate. Yes, right.
It's insulting. It's insulting to males as well.
Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right.
Because patriarchy harms men as well as women,
Absolutely. I mean, fundamentally wounds us in so many ways. And this film is a really good example of that. It's a really good example of how that happens, right? It's just awful. I mean, I don't know what else to say about it. This is a terrible terrible film. And the fact, its only saving grace is that it seems to have largely been forgotten.
Yeah.
I don't think there was another Poltergeist remake film, was there? There wasn't. No. What a surprise! What a surprise,
Yeah.
And
it's so
kind of
nondescript that basically it sank without a trace, and nobody remembers it.
I mean, I would love to see if Poltergeist ever came back as a franchise. I would love them to go back to what they originally intended for Poltergeist 4, which never got off the ground, which was going to apparently be a prequel following. It was going to be about Henry Kane and his cult.
Well, that's interesting.
Really fascinating, really fascinating. Yeah. I mean, I would like to see it come back in the form of like a series, like a streaming series or something.
Yes.
I think that could be fascinating. I mean, I was talking to my mother about it, and I was saying, what they could do? You could have someone like investigating the events that happened in Cuesta Verde, that like actually happened in 1980, and you can have like someone from now going back and sort of investigating what happened and slowly piecing together what happened and cutting in between now and like the time of Henry Kane and following that story simultaneously. That could be really, really, really fascinating. You could even you could have characters from the original franchise. Like Carol Ann would be a woman now, right? And Robbie would be grown up now, so you could bring them in. It could be so interesting.
Yeah. They kind of did that with the TV series based on The Exorcist a few years ago. Where,
yes.
Spoilers, everybody. The Gina Davis character turns out to be Reagan, all grown up.
Yeah.
It's a shame because it's a good idea making a TV series based on that legend, but it wasn't particularly good, I'm afraid, in the execution.
No.
But
but there's legs there, isn't there? There's potential.
There are, yeah.
And especially here, where you've got so much about the metaphysics and the history that's kind of suggested and implied, you could do a lot with it. You could do an awful amount with it. I mean, the whole notion of Henry Kane's cult, how did it get started? How did they break away from whatever society they were originally part of? And that could be really fun.
A story about a really toxic cult-like, Christian movement that causes death and destruction to its members and goes on to haunt anybody that that's this is a good time for stories like that.
It's thematically interesting.
Stories that Christian fascism is on the rise. Let's tell these stories.
Absolutely. Let's take it in that direction, right? It's thematically resonant. It could be really, really interesting. And also, I mean, it ties into that sort of 30-year cycle obsession of nostalgia that we fall into, where, we become obsessed with whatever decade it was 30 years previously. So now we have the tail end of the obsession with the 1980s, obviously. So it would work on that level too.
Yeah, Pennywise goes to sleep for 30 years and then wakes up. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, it is again. I mean, that is actually happening, isn't it? There is actually a series of It in production, which is exactly that. It's exploring like the history of Derry and of Pennywise and the previous cycles when he woke up.
Yeah.
That could be very interesting.
I want to call Netflix and pitch my my series. Miskatonic, which is like a mini series which is like all these different things from Lovecraft stories are all happening at the same place. I
love that'd be great. That'd be so much fun. Why not? Why not? I think that's a great idea. I'm surprised it hasn't been done.
Or another one, if you could get the rights, would be a series called Overlook, where like it's an anthology series where every series is different, like American Horror Story and so on, and it's always set in the Overlook Hotel but at a different era. So you have the one in the 20s with the gangsters, you have the whatever.
That could be brilliant. That the potential of that is that's one that you want to pitch, because I think that could be made. I think that could have real legs.
Oh yeah,
and it could be brilliant. I mean, it could be absolutely stunning. And of course, the final season.
Sadly, TV producers are not beating a path to my door. I don't know why, but
no.
get in touch, Netflix.
Yeah.
You know, I will write these series for you for only several £1 million. So
I mean, the potential of that is amazing. It has to be done, you know. It needs to be done. It's one of those things I would ache to actually watch, you know. But sadly, whenever like Stephen King's stories are adapted into series, they very rarely work. Like, you know, we had the Mist, didn't we, not too long ago on
that was
Netflix.
the TV version of The Mist was atrocious.
Oh, it was garbage. It was hot garbage. I don't know what they were thinking with it. I don't know why they changed the mythology of like what the Mist is. It's like.
I mean, I agree with you, but it was also garbage on a nuts and bolts level.
Oh yeah, like
the acting and the dialogue was atrocious.
It was just bad, wasn't it? It was just a badly put together piece of work.
It was painful watching that. I could barely watch it.
And it's a shame because there's potential there. There's a lot of potential there because, of course, the Mist by its very nature suggests loads of stories happening worldwide.
Oh yeah. Castle Rock had its moments, but it was very slow. It
was. I mean, I loved the idea of Castle Rock. I mean, this notion of like, you know, everything in Stephen King happening in all at once in one town.
Yeah, well,
brilliant.
That's kind of in the books themselves, isn't it? Because you know, characters in whatever will drive through Derry and think, well, this is a weird town, and then they'll get on with their own plot. You know, it's
yes. It's the Dark Tower thing, isn't it? You know, where like all King's books sort of exist in one multiverse. Which is cute. I actually kind of like it. I'll be honest. I do like it when you see characters turn up or places or, you know, things referred to. I you know, I get a little buzz out of that.
It's enjoyable. Yeah,
it can be cute. It can be very, very cute indeed. But yeah, I love that idea. And with Poltergeist, this I mean, it would be difficult casting wise because you'd have to get someone who has the gravitas and the presence of Julian Beck, and that would be very, very hard.
Yeah, he's a real one-off. You know,
he is, isn't he? I mean, just visually alone, beyond anything else. I mean, his performance is amazing. It just completely dominates the second film. It completely dominates the second film, but just like visually.
Yeah, as I say, you know, it's a variable film overall, but I think Kane is one of the all-time great horror villains. Really do.
Yeah. Well, he has made an impact, hasn't he? I mean, even people like who've forgotten the second film, who maybe watched it when they were kids, they remember Kane. Oh, they remember Kane.
Yeah.
I think it was Justin Park when I interviewed him. He said Kane featured very, very widely in his childhood nightmares.
Oh yeah, because he is nightmarish. He's kind of wide-eyed and reptilian, and he never says anything overtly threatening either. That's one of the great things about him.
That's what's so much fun. That performance, I will eat up again and again and again. I will go to YouTube and watch clips of that performance and just love it. You know, get a buzz out of it. I love that. Yeah. I know we've done it already, but it's that initial meeting. You know, when he goes up to Carol Ann, he's, "Are you lost, sweetheart?" And he's got that slightly feathery, "Are you afraid, darling?"
That sing-song voice. And,
you creepy fuck. You know, it's just on the right side of creepy, isn't it? Just on the right side. It's just beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. What a performance.
That balancing act where it's, as you say, it's just on the right side. It is creepy, but there's nothing about it where you feel like the actor is trying to make it creepy.
Nope.
It's just he's just doing it, you know. And the creepiness is up to you to infer. That is so difficult. There's so much skill there, you know. You got to take your hat off to that.
It's hard, isn't it? Because I imagine he's also sort of fighting against his aesthetic as well. Because if he went overboard like by an inch, it would be ridiculous. Because he looks so creepy. He looks so disturbing. It would just tip it right over the edge and make him into a cartoon villain. Well, Jack, I think, you know, I mean, I almost want to apologize because we really went like, you know, we tore that 2015 film apart. I
think people will like this. I think people will enjoy this.
I think people, because by and large, most of these have been really positive, haven't they?
Well, we were very positive about 1 and 2, and we were, not blind to the flaws of number 3, but very appreciative of its many virtues. And yeah,
Is there just one question before we go? Is there anything you can say in the remake's favor?
No,
I struggle too. I can't.
As I say, Sam Rockwell is trying. That's probably the best I can do.
That's about it. Yeah, I can't think of a damn thing. I actually can't think of a damn thing. It's not even so bad it's good. It's not like watch it as a cautionary example. No, just don't waste your time or your emotion on it. It's not going to waste any on you.
Yeah, it's just it's the epitome of that thing that exists just to fill a corner in the schedule. It's got no reason to exist whatsoever aside somebody thought they might make a bit of money out of it. Nobody was invested in it at any stage. It's got no spark of life to it. It's pure product, and it's ballast as well. It's the cinematic equivalent of polystyrene packing material.
Exactly that. I couldn't have put it better. Could not have put it better. That is exactly what it is. Well, on that note, Jack, I think we'll draw this to a close. Do you have anything that you'd like to pimp out before we go?
Oh, yes, please. You can find me on Twitter at _Jack_Graham_, and of course I link to most of my stuff there. If you want to listen to more of me talking, my main project at the moment is I Don't Speak German at Libsyn, which is a podcast that I do with my friend Daniel Harper, who is a researcher into the far right, and he we've had a bit of a lull recently for various reasons, but we're still very much on the job, and he tells me about his researches into the far right, and our last episode, for instance, was all about the war between Steven Crowder and Ben Shapiro, at the Daily Wire.
God, that I haven't listened to that one yet, but that I've got to have a look at. That must be amusing.
Yeah, and we went into what we think that means, but we went into the events themselves, but also how other people on the right have reacted to it and what we think the meaning of it is and stuff like that. So yeah, if you engage with any of my stuff, engage with I Don't Speak German, which is it's in all the usual podcast places, and it's hosted at Libsyn. At my Patreon, which you can have access to if you give me as little as $1 measly per month. You get advanced access to anything I write. I do occasionally write essays. I write ghost stories, which I sometimes publish. So if I'm going to publish it, you'll get advanced access to a story of mine. I do an exclusive podcast with Kit Power, who's also a regular with George, and
certainly is.
He and I, who's a good friend of mine, and he and I and Daniel do a Patreon exclusive series, exclusive to our Patreons, where we talk about the Sherlock Holmes stories, the original stories. And Daniel and I do IDSG bonus episodes where we talk about the news or we talk about movies. You get that through the Patreon. And I blog at Eruditorium Press. So excellent. Yeah, that's my stuff.
Excellent. As per usual, guys, links to all of that below. As for myself, same as usual, you can find me knocking about on the Exaggerated Elegy channel, where there will be more discussions like this. Lots and lots of different podcasts going on at the moment. You can also find me over at the new channel at Our Lives in Horror, where there are lots of discussions and interviews with various horror creators from across the board, really. We've got people who work in publishing. We've had lots of horror writers on. More and more people coming up. There's actually quite a lot scheduled for that one, which is really, really, really nice. You can find links to all of my published work over at strangeplaygrounds.com. And if you fancy chatting to me, you can come and chat to me over at Twitter on Enigmatic Elegy. Jack, that was fabulous. What a brilliant series this was. This was great fun, these discussions.
This was fun, yeah.
Really was. And thank you guys for listening along with us. Until next time, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.